Hello and welcome to Supreme Court Observer's Live Daily Updates. I'm R. Sai Spandana and I'm an associate editor at Supreme Court Observer. Today we talk about a case that celebrates 50 years of its judgment, the Kesavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala case. This judgment, delivered by a 13-judge bench of the Supreme Court in 1973, remains relevant and used in almost every constitutional bench proceeding before the Supreme Court even today. This case is famously known as the basic structure case because it is through the judgment in this case that the Supreme Court established the basic structure doctrine. For the purposes of this video today, I will very briefly speak about what happened immediately before the Kesavananda Bharati case, briefly the facts of the Kesavananda Bharati case, and focus on the impact of the case and the basic structure doctrine for the rest of the time. So the essence of this case springs from a very simple question of whether amendments are laws and whether Part 3, that is the part of the Constitution that guarantees to all citizens the fundamental rights, could be amended. Up until 1967, the constitutional amendments were deemed as not laws under Article 13 of the Constitution, and therefore Parliament could amend the fundamental rights. In 1967, by virtue of the Supreme Court's judgment in Golaknath versus State of Punjab, the court stated that amendments were laws, and by virtue of Article 13, no law that abridged or took away fundamental rights could be enacted by Parliament, and therefore the Parliament could not enact any law that abridged or took away in any form the fundamental rights guaranteed to citizens under Part 3 of the Constitution. Now, while this is in the background, to get to the preliminary facts of the Kesavananda Bharati case. The lead petitioner in the case was Sripada Kesavananda Bharati, who was the head of Edanir Mutt, a religious sect in the state of Kerala. In 1969, the state of Kerala enacted the Land Reforms Amendment Act, by virtue of which it acquired some of the land under Kesavananda Bharati's name. And Mr. Kesavananda Bharati challenged this before the Supreme Court, stating that it breached his fundamental right to religious affairs, autonomy of religion, as well as back in the day, the right to property was also a fundamental right under Part 3. So, the Kerala Land Reforms Amendment Act of 69 was challenged. While the case was pending before the Supreme Court, the Kerala government enacted the Kerala Land Reforms Act of 1971, which essentially solidified the 68 Amendment. The major question before the Constitution bench, the largest Constitution bench that the country has seen till date, constituted of 13 judges, led by the then Chief Justice Sikri, was essentially, could amendments be made to Part 3 of the Constitution? There are, of course, other constitutional amendments challenged, that is the Constitutional Amendment or the 24th, 25th, 29th Constitutional Amendment Acts and several others. But the key question was, could Part 3 of the Constitution be amended by Parliament? The 13-judge bench heard the case for over 68 days and finally on 24th April 1973 delivered its final verdict. The bench essentially held in a judgment of 7:6 ratio. The majority of the bench held that the Parliament could amend fundamental rights, but it could not make amendments to the basic structure of the Constitution. So essentially this judgment established and founded the basic structure doctrine of the Constitution. Now, what is the basic structure doctrine? It is essentially those features of the Constitution that are so essential to the constitutional values envisioned by our forefathers that without them the Constitution would be spiritless. Now, the list of principles and doctrine that are part of the basic structure doctrine has evolved over time, but some of these are, for instance, the doctrine of separation of powers, the supremacy of the constitution, the supremacy of the rule of law, the principles of democracy, secularity, as mentioned earlier, separation of powers, liberty and freedom of thought and expression, the sovereignty and integrity of India. Over the years, even rights such as free and fair elections have been constituted to be part of the basic structure of the constitution. Essentially, the basic structure doctrine flows from the superior thought that the constitution is supreme to the democratic fabric of our country, and no individual, group, organization, or no faction of the government, the legislature, judiciary, or the executive, are above the constitution. And it goes without saying that this is a doctrine that has not only evolved for the better over the years, but has also faced significant criticism by the union. Most recently, for instance, when it came to the collegium debates of the method of appointing judges to High Courts and Supreme Court, the union strongly opposed the Kesavananda Bharati judgment and the idea of the basic structure doctrine, to which a few days later Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud stated that the Kesavananda Bharati judgment was a guiding force for the judiciary and also for the constitutional democracy of India, and was very significant in maintaining the fabric of our democracy. Even in recent hearings before the constitutional benches of the Supreme Court, such as the case in relation to the Maharashtra disqualification case in the Shiv Sena defection. More recently, even in the plea for marriage equality, references were made to the basic structure doctrine, where the petitioners argued that when fundamental rights of a citizen are breached, the court has the power to hear the plea of the petitioner under Article 32, and this power of the court constituted a part of the basic structure doctrine. So this doctrine is so fundamental to our democracy that it has also been adopted by some of our neighboring countries like Bangladesh and Pakistan, for instance. And the significance of the case is so much so that to commemorate the judgment, today the Supreme Court has dedicated an entire web page to the Kesavananda Bharati judgment. The web page is titled The Basic Structure Judgment, and it can be found on the Supreme Court of India's homepage. It has all the details about the case, including the 13 judges who constituted the bench in the case, the written submissions by both the petitioners and the respondent, that is the state of Kerala, in the case, as well as the recordings and head notes made during the proceedings. So do check out the judgment page, and that concludes our live today. As we remember this historic judgment from 50 years ago. Stay tuned to Supreme Court Observer for more daily updates on all significant ongoing cases at the Supreme Court. Follow our social media pages, log into our website for all latest hearing reports, analytical pieces, and all significant updates of the Supreme Court. Thank you.